slight change from the agenda. 3 of us, small but mighty panel here. Before we get started,
Eric, I'll be done.
there are a couple of people floating around with pieces of paper and pens. So if you have a burning question on this particular topic, feel free to stick your hand up, and we'll reserve a few minutes at the end of the panel to answer any questions you may have. So please go ahead and we'll pick the funniest question or the most difficult question to answer. So what we thought we'd do here is tackle this topic of role and impact of the CMO. Big scope, so we'll narrow it down to a couple of different areas. Again, feel free to jump into it, ask anything that you think we may have missed. But before we get going here, why don't we introduce the panel? So Carolyn, do you want to kick off and explain who you are and why you're here?
Sure. No, happy to. So I am Carolyn Crandall. I am the Chief Marketing Officer over at Attivo Networks. It is a cybersecurity company that uses deception to kind of get the cyber attackers to reveal their presence by engaging with different traps and lures. So, something we've known for years in warfare, gambling, et cetera, that's now being brought to the cybersecurity front. So very, very fun. Some may look at my bio and see Chief Deception Officer, which is again, my little marketing handle. I'm not putting them together. I'm not trying to deceive you today, but it's the technology we use. So I've been in high tech for about 30 years now. I'm in different sales and marketing capacity, and really happy to share any insights that I can about the experiences along the way and the role that I play today.
Thank you. My name is Wayne Ariola, and I realize I'm talking too close into the microphone right now. Here we go. Hey, by the way, I'm looking out on the audience, and I think all my time-age jokes are going to land perfectly. This is not like talking to millennials where they look at me and don't understand what Pac-Man is. So I'm glad. We're going to have a good conversation. I am the CMO of a company called Tricentis. Tricentis is in not such a sexy field as security. We're in the amazingly sexy field of software testing. I know there's usually a round of applause here. But we are, this industry's in transformation. So the interesting thing about software testing today is the fact that it is a total spin. We are reinventing it from end to end. And that's what Tricentis is.
Excellent, thank you. And for my part, Stephen Wastie. I'm the CMO of a company called Unravel Data. We essentially monitor and fix issues with applications that are depending on the big data stack. So if you're running applications on Kafka, Spark, Hadoop, those kind of technologies, then they're pretty hard if any of you are trying to do that. So we try and help people do this more effectively. Okay, so the first thread we thought we'd kick off here with is, I think, arguably the most important role of the CMO, and probably the hardest, and annoyingly, probably the one that you're never done with. Which is hiring. And so, as companies grow, or if you're maintaining a team and whatever stage you're at, maybe you're coming in at Series A or Series B, or maybe you're a public company, whatever stage you're at in the company's growth, a big part of your role as a CMO or head of function is to maintain and grow that sort of high-performing team. And so the first question I have for and Carolyn, you can maybe kick us off here, is that when you've got roles that you have open and you're trying to hire for, and you've got this perfect notion of all of the various attributes of what this person should look like, when you find that person, which of course you never do, it's relatively straightforward, right? But many of the sort of calibration kind of efforts you have to go through in hiring these roles, you're dealing with, well, this person's trying to make a career transition. They may be done early stage, but I'm looking for a little later stage. Or I was looking for somebody that maybe has this experience, but now they're making a jump into this domain, so there's not quite enough domain expertise. Or maybe they've taken a break, right, and they're coming back. Or there's a lot of different variables, right, which contribute to not the perfect profile, and you have to decide on kind of what the compromises are. So how do you approach that problem when you're calibrating through candidates, and what do you compromise on, what do you don't compromise on?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I don't know that anybody ever really checks 100% of the boxes in the profile. And it's really interesting, just a dynamic that I see between men and women. A lot of times the men that'll apply for the job will only have 80% of the qualifications, where I'll find that the women tend to be a little bit more conservative, and they will try to apply for the jobs that they already have. And so I guess part of my advice here to you is, if you're looking for a job, don't be afraid to stretch yourself out there a little bit and go for the job that's maybe a little bit beyond what you've done in the past. I've done it for myself, sometimes put myself into scary positions of, wow, I don't know that I have the experience to do all of it, but I know how to do a lot of it. So I guess the thing that I would say there is I'm looking for the athlete. You may not have to check every single one of the boxes, but I'm going to think about the other things. What's your track record of success? How well have you done moving from one thing to another? I find it really frustrating for people that say, hey, you've got to have done every single one of these things before because it's just not practical. Or maybe that person has done it so many times over, they just don't have any fire left in their belly to do the job. So I am looking for the people that have had a great success record doing the things they do. They're willing to stretch themselves a bit into something new and take on different things. I will admittedly, if you're changing on your resume every year, and I know that's something with the youth of today, that they're kind of chasing the next golden rainbow, but it does matter. I'll want to know, and you'll probably want to have some good answers as to, well, why, right? Why did you change jobs every year? And sometimes, hey, we hit hard luck situations, and those are explainable, but if you do have that on your resume, think about what your answer to that is and be able to explain it, because otherwise you're going to put doubt in my mind as to whether you're going to be committed and whether I'm willing to invest in you if you don't invest back in the job. So it's just some thinking about when I look at people and how I go about hiring.
Just out of curiosity, though, do you have a certain approach in your interview style on how you ferret that out? It's funny. I actually find, and fortunately I have a team of people too, that my team tends to be actually a lot harder on the candidates and looking at their practical experience, right? Can you do these particular tactics or functions of the job? I like to just talk to people and get to know. And so, having that person be prepared to talk about, well, where were they successful? Where did they fail? How did they recover from that? And I live a lot and I try to drive my team a lot by what I call their signature projects. And I will talk a lot with people about what is your signature project? And if you struggle to tell me what that is, then I know that you're not the person that's going to come in and want to do great things, be disruptive, drive change. So I will absolutely, it's one of my favorite questions. What are your signature projects? And what did you like about them? What did you learn from them? What would you do differently? I use that one too, by the way. I love that one. That was a good one. For me, quite honestly, the feedback I get after the interview is, I don't know how it went. That's the first thing I always get. Because the first thing that happens with me when the candidate comes into the door, I say, so, what questions do you have? That's it. That's my only interview question. And 90% of the time, and this is mind-boggling to me, 90% of the time, the answer I get is, well, I've had 5 interviews before you, and I've asked all my questions. And I said, hey, they're lying, so you might as well ask me, right? So the idea here is that, for me at least, is I'm looking for the creativity and the ability to actually get yourself out of a box, right? So you have a project you're now responsible for. What's the first thing you're doing? You're not going to go sprint forward and go do it. You're going to ask questions. So that's what I'm looking for first and foremost, and it's the only thing I rate the candidates on. What kind of questions are you asking me?
How much weight do you guys put on back channel references?
0.
Oh, I'm gonna take the opposite side. So I will look at your social media profile. So I will talk to people who I know that know you, and everything's a grain of salt, because you know what? There are a lot of times that you can be successful in one type of a company and not in another. And so I won't always weight everything heavily, but I will definitely talk to people who worked with you, because culture is a massive thing for me. You've got to have the right attitude, and with the teams that I manage, we really live by whatever it takes. So if anybody gives me, that's not my job, they were really difficult to work with, and that doesn't mean that you can't have a difference of opinion, and that's where I will respect that, you may not be the most popular or liked person, but if you're the person that's willing to go out and stand for what you believe in, that's okay. But I do listen to learn a little bit more about that person, and who they are.
How do you guys, how do you feel about the overqualified candidate? So, some people have in mind this, where the candidate's going to be in their career arc for that particular role, right? But there are many people out there who are phenomenally talented and phenomenally experienced, but maybe they decided they don't want to manage a team, right? And they want to step back into an individual contributor role, or maybe they've stepped out of the workforce for a while, or whatever the scenario is. How do you think about the overqualified candidate? Does that scare you off, or does it actually excite you?
So I don't distinguish between overqualified or not. I just distinguish between fit for the role, and that's really it. And if I can get to the point where I'm confident that they're able to deliver it, I'm pretty happy because I know it's one less thing I'm going to have to worry about. And I think that's it. I mean, whenever I hear the overqualified candidate, I unfortunately think it's someone who looks like me, right? Losing their hair, kind of going gray in the back, right? So unfortunately, I'm a huge champion for myself. So I actually see if I can foster them along the process. But it's all about expectation setting at that point in time, right? Can they and are they willing to actually take the step to do what's needed to be done today? Which actually takes me back to the fact that even today, where we are, I would call us early stage transformational kind of step right now, right? Is a lot of the overqualified candidates, in quotes, are coming from large organizations. So they're really looking at a huge segmentation of duties. And then when you're coming into my organization, it's like, hey guys, look, it's about getting the job done. It's about doing this transformation, so you got to kick in here and there. So if the energy level's there, if there's a fit and understanding in terms of what I'm expecting, what their duties are going to be, I'm absolutely fine.
Let's talk about managing teams a little bit. So, all of us, if you have a team of more than a few people, it's probably a real mix of generations, backgrounds, and so forth. Hopefully, different profiles as well. So, when you think about managing teams, it wasn't that long ago when people were managing to distribution curves, and you'd over reward the top 10% and fire the bottom 10, and everyone in the middle would kind of sit there and coast along. But things have clearly changed. Expectations in the workforce have clearly changed. Just our way we work has changed without stating the obvious. But how do you go about sort of motivating teams, managing, grading, and getting the most out of your teams from a performance management standpoint? Carolyn, you want to start?
So I'll say that there's three types of candidates, and I know there's a couple members of my team in the audience that are going to laugh when they hear this, like, here she goes. But you're either going to be put into what I call my superstars. These are going to be my people that are super energy, they're on a career path, they want a promotion, they're ready to go out and conquer the world. I have other folks that I would put into my superstars that love what they do. They don't want to change roles. They don't want to change positions. They just want to be recognized and rewarded for being an expert in the field that they're in. And then there's the third category, which are the people that are just in the wrong role. All right, and those are the ones that don't end up making it. I think the way that a lot of companies operate and a lot of the reward systems are built are only to reward the superstar. And what happens a lot of times is that rock star hits the top of the pay grade, and then it becomes a question of how do you then motivate them? Or with other folks, you may be able to increase their pay, increase the scope of their role, introduce them to different things. But I do think there's creativity that needs to be applied for your rock stars. How do you maybe find golden handcuffs with stock options? How do you present new training opportunities and options? How do you put them in leadership roles of maybe mentoring other people that are coming in, making them feel very valued? Because honestly, sometimes they're your kind of workhorse that are forgotten, but you kind of live in fear that, especially in a small startup where that one person may be running a whole functional area, what if that person leaves, right? I'm going to have a massive hole that a person fresh out of college is not going to be able to fill. So, in that hiring that in this valley is so competitive to get that person back, you've got to take care of those people. You really do. It's worth the time and energy to figure out how to keep them happy.
Right.
Totally agree, by the way. So not much I can add here yet. I will say what I have found, it's more the pacing of the work at this point in time. Because no matter whatever's in front of us or whatever the goal is that we're trying to achieve, that line isn't going to move, right? So it's the pacing of how to get there. And what I have found is there's people who can pick it up. There's people who are going to sit in their sweet spot, and what kind of cadence they can deliver at. And then you have these folks who kind of fall to the wayside. And unfortunately, those are the distributions I think that fit right into your rock stars, your engines, and then your folks that you are probably in the wrong role. But I see it more as the cadence of delivery.
Great. So change the track here a little bit. Quick question for the audience. How many heads of functions do we have in the room? If you're a CMO, VP of marketing, you're the sort of top function, okay. So two questions on this. So if you're interviewing for the head of function, CMO, VP of marketing, whatever the title is, doesn't really matter. Oftentimes, if anybody's been through this process recently, they'll know this. You go through a series of interviews with various people in the company. You probably hit a few of the board members, a few of the investors, obviously the leadership team, and frequently, they have this idea of, they want the person that can do it all, right? And a lot of it, I think, is you're qualifying the place that you're looking at joining as much as they are qualifying your fit for the role as well. And so when you think about that, when everyone's sort of looking for that perfect unicorn that can really do anything and everything for every stage of the company between now and infinity, then a lot of it is expectation setting and getting to the real crux to make sure everybody's aligned, right? There's nothing worse than going into a role where you suddenly find that half the management team was not on board, or there's some board member that's influential that was not on board with the decision. So how do you, or advice for people going through that interview process, how do you qualify and make sure that you're doing your job right to interview them as much as they're interviewing you? Do you want to start?
Sure. So personally, I mean, I have a bias here. If the answer is already on the table and they just want someone to just drive the car at a normal pace, I just know that's not me. I need to blow something up, mess it up, and then put the pieces back together, right? So that's what I'm good at. So, and that's really, and while I'm interviewing them, I'm finding whether the fit is there or not. Where are you in the message? How transformational do you want to be? Are you just at a normal clicking cadence in which you're looking for incremental growth, or do you need to blow something up because you got a board who's breathing down your back? I think most of us fall in that last category anyways, but no matter what, I think you got to find that fit for you. Where are you most comfortable? I'm most comfortable when there aren't any answers and we have to make something up, which I love chief deception officer, by the way. I might steal that.
All right. And just, so it was funny, we were actually talking in the green room before with a bunch of people, and one person had introduced it as a square, and I kind of look at it as a hexagon, which is, I think, something we need to think about in both ways. And if you look at, when you go to interview or when I'm interviewing something, first, is the company a right match? Does the company have a good reputation? Is it the type of company? Again, the stage of the company. Are you a big company person, a startup company person? Look at the company, look at the technology. So technology winning or losing technology, or maybe losing isn't fair, but maybe 10th on the list of competitors versus up at the top. And I'll have people think about the culture. The culture is very, very important as well. And then there's other lifestyle things. How is the commute? Do you have the freedom if you have things going on at home or a child to pick up? Will they let you go do those type of things? Compensation is another piece. Sometimes I might find the right candidate, but their compensation is out of line. And maybe reverse the other way. If I'm looking at a job and the compensation isn't where I want it to be, it might mean that it's a mismatch. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank for the number 6 that was on the list. But there is a grouping of things that you go through and you evaluate everything and you stack it up on both sides to say, is this a good match for me as a hire, and is it a good match for the company? 6 was job description, a very important one. And is it the right job for the person? Are they qualified enough? Do they show the right appetite to grow in the position? So I'd encourage you to look at it as well as you evaluate the companies, because that's what in a lot of cases we'll be evaluating back to. Do you fit? And it doesn't mean that you're not a great person or a great worker. Sometimes there's just not a fit in the company. So something to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion always about tenure of the CMO and what is it, 18 months, is it 2.5 years, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. How much do you think that is related to stage of company versus performance? So as you join a company at stage B, and suddenly you find yourselves 3 years later, 5 times the size and heading towards an IPO, then it's a different kind of person. So how much is it related to stage, do you think?
It's all part of the personality, right? What do you feel, in my point of perspective here, that you're the best fit for? Are you laying the foundation in order to layer in that incremental growth that is going to get you to the next stage? Are you going to then be able to expand it for geo, channel, and all the other aspects of how to bring that revenue in? Or are you the person who's going to lay the foundation for actually streamlined, very, very measurable cadence type growth? I think it's a totally different job at every stage. And unfortunately, it's inversely correlated to creativity. So the more that you are being pounded on, the more the cadence and driving the metrics at the top line, the creativity for me seems to creep out the window. So I always kind of fall back, unfortunately, to the earlier stage opportunities, which, for me, you got to figure out really where do you want to fit.
And if I could add to that, I think if I look at a Series A company, the thing that you're going to get asked all the time is how technical you are, because nothing is defined. No collateral is built, the marketing strategy. And I even had a friend once tell me when software-defined networking was first coming into vogue, he was like, do not take that job, because chances are the direction that the company was going to go at first was probably not going to be the right one. And what happens to the first CMO is you usually get blown up. So he was trying to be kind and say, you know what, you're good, but no matter how good you are, you're probably still going to fail because they're not going to get the company positioning right. So if you can't be an active part of that conversation of the positioning of the company and have the influence, you got to be prepared to know you might end up flipping jobs in 9 months. Now, on the other side, as you start to grow, going from an A to B, you're building things. So if you're a builder, an innovator, you don't mind that there's no pavement down on the road, there's no definition of things, you're building everything, that's a great place to be. And as you start to get into C and beyond, you're going to have some structure, and then you're iterating, you're building upon things, but you're not creating them for the first time. And then if you get into a big company, you may be very specialized. So if you want to really go deep into an area and be an expert, then big companies offer a lot of opportunity, but they do kill some of the innovation and creativity, because then you've got to collaborate with 30 people in a room versus just going and doing it.
So one of the privileges, I guess, of being in the marketing function, and specifically leading the marketing function, is you have to think short term, right? You have to think about how you're helping to drive revenue in quarter, and yet you have to think, different time horizons out as well, maybe even out to 2-3 years if you're thinking about driving roadmap and partnerships and stuff, which may take a while to come to fruition. So, when you think through those time horizons and you think how much weighting you put on each. How do you do that, right? Because everyone's under pressure to, you're as good as your last quarter. And sales guys are beating you around the head to get more pipeline. And on the other hand, you're trying to do things that are more strategic, that'll drive a, 18-month, 2-year kind of revenue line and grow the TAM opportunity and so forth. So how do you approach that? How do you approach time horizons?
So personally, we just merged with a company, and it was really interesting. So the company we merged with kept a 1-year plan. And I was like, this is absurd. But they could not believe that I kept a half year, plus we basically, every 3 months, we blew it up and moved the next 3 months out, then moved the next 3 months out. And they were perplexed on how we could keep up with the actual metrics and goals with such frequency of change. However, I would say where we are for our market, which needs to be disruptive and transformational, I can't plan what I'm going to tell you in 6 months, because it could be totally different today. So you have a rolling 3-month plan? Yeah, a rolling 3-month plan, and that actually gets reevaluated, midterm on purpose. And the whole purpose is to question ourselves and to try to mess it up, try to blow it up, and see if we can't rebuild something better for the next building blocks down the road.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. We're going through financial planning for 2019 right now, and a lot of that is predicting, well, what's it going to look like? You get some correlation between the sales growth and the leads that we need to fill the funnel, and you know what? It's never enough. I don't care what stage company you're in. It's never enough, or they're never good enough. And so you go through it, and I do agree that you're forced to put a year plan out there, but you've got to be nimble enough to know that, every quarter you should be reevaluating it. You should be tracking where you've been, how successful you've been at that, and where you want to go next, because, you should be doing trial and error, and sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not, and you want to adjust. You don't want to just keep going to that event because you've always gone to it, or because the sales team begged you for it, because if it turns out you got no pipeline from it, well, I don't care how much that salesperson begs, we probably shouldn't go do it again. So So thinking through that planning, and then there's disruptive ways of planning too. If your company is growing really quickly, what's the impact of expanding and keeping that right balance? So one of the dilemmas we're looking at is we're going international right now, and they all want money to fuel the initial entry. How much do you balance between feeding the part that generates the revenue for the company and a new market expansion? And again, there's a lot of trial and error there as you try to come up with the right balances.
Cool. We have a few more questions here, but before I do that, any questions from the audience? Anand, did we get any cards? If not, we'll just keep going. Or if you want to stick your hand up and ask a question. Oh, we got a couple. Okay. Let's take a look at these. All right, thank you. Wow, long question. All right. Yeah, you can read that one, and I'll read this one. All right. How do you effectively deal with the interference? I like that. Interference from the CEO, especially if you think if he's dead wrong. There's no name at the bottom of this, but anyway. Karen, you want to take that? How do you deal with your boss?
So what I dub as the seagull CEO kind of swoops in. So there's two types. There is the swooper that's going to come in out of the blue and be like, I want this, I need this, or I think we need to be doing this or not doing this. And there is a lot of management that has to happen so that you can keep with your strategy and not be kind of derailed by a particular tactic behind it. Managing the CEO is a big part of the job, a very big part, and you have to understand and respect that they're in their role. They have the right to make decisions that you may not always agree with, and then you have to choose wisely. Sometimes it's worth, coming up and arguing with the CEO, and I love the position I'm in. This is my 4th time working for the CEO, so he and I can go rounds, and I'm not afraid. Well, I guess if he fires me, he'll probably hire me back the next day. But you do have to decide how much can you push that CEO between becoming a pain in the neck and being able to state your cause. So you just have to kind of regulate what battles to take and which ones to pass on.
Yeah. Right.
I think I know who wrote this question. So, by the way, if it is a fuel for creativity, I love it, right? If it's confrontational and you get into the why not this, why not that, then it's the prioritization conversation, right? And say, look, anything can be done. And obviously, I'm in situations like this, and the way I explain it is, why didn't we do this? And it's like, well, why didn't I take a shower today? I got up, I got on the phone at 6 a.m. I could have taken a shower, but I took the next phone call. I took the next phone call. I work from home, thank God. And at this point, you got to just prioritize with the CEO on where does it fit in the overarching strategy. And it doesn't always work because sometimes it's a passion, and you got to fit the passion in. Yeah,
for me, I think it's part of the qualification going in, right? Part of the conversation we had earlier is can you work with that person knowing that they're going to be in your shorts on probably a daily basis? But if that interaction is positive and constructive, then that's okay. You're not going to agree on everything, and frankly, you don't have to. But I think that's a big part of the qualification going in is, what's that interaction going to look like? When you're backed in the corner and you're disagreeing on stuff, like is that a constructive conversation or not? So I think it can be super positive, but it is not an easy task. I agree with that. Last question here, then I think we're out of time, Anand. Have you seen social media become a more central part of a business strategy, and what does that mean for marketing teams? So how do you view social?
Extraordinarily important in terms of awareness. It's our number one awareness driver. It's also the place where it's my testing ground for the new stuff, right? So anything that I want to actually package and try out, see how it goes, social is my channel. If it's hot and it gets great response, awesome, let's promote it. We'll go through more traditional channels. If it bombs, it disappears. It's awesome, it goes away.
I think especially for consumer brands, it is critical to the business, and there are a ton of creative ways that you can use that to build awareness, get engagement. I find the biggest thing is companies that do it to just kind of, speak from a megaphone and don't try to get engagement from the community are probably going to see minimal success. So if you're going to look at social media as part of your strategy, it does take a lot of work. The ROI is often very difficult to track and monitor, but I do believe it needs needs to be a part of every organization's channel, but it's not done in a silo. It has to back other things you're doing, announcements, events, blogs you're putting out, other things, because you've got to get that engagement up and going for you to really get the full benefit of social.
We're 1 minute over. Can I do one more? One more question? All right. We've got a bunch here. I'm not going to get to them all. I apologize for that. Please talk about a challenging marketing case. So I guess the question for you guys is there something you've really struggled with recently, whether it's a strategy change or a new market or a person you had to deal with, or anything that was particularly challenging that you had to deal with in the last couple of quarters?
I'll jump in. So, MarTech. There is so much technology that's out there that, and it was funny, the speaker spoke about before that I probably get 100 emails before breakfast, and most of them are unsolicited, trying to sell me one new tool, new resource. And you know what? I look at them. I might only look at them for 2 seconds, but I am always looking at new technology, trying to figure out if there's something we should be using or adopting, or a new program that's being provided by a vendor. And it's very hard to try to differentiate and choose, but I think as a CMO, it is one of the hardest challenges to not be left behind, right? Not miss out on that new technology that could give me a competitive advantage.
Yeah. Thanks, Wayne.
So, this just popped up, by the way. So the biggest challenge I'm facing right now is relative power of the product managers as we've had an adjustment in the product management group. So the relative influence of the founder versus the relative influence of somebody who actually has the money-winning technology. So the balance between the two is I feel like I'm a psychologist at times.
All right, and I did one input for me on that would be, for those of you thinking about kind of account-based marketing, or if you listened to John earlier, the Engagio sort of account-based everything approach, I think it's really hard. We've thrown it around as a sort of easy thing to do, named account, target account selling, all that kind of stuff. But getting ABM done right at scale is like really, really hard. And it's a cultural shift for the entire company. And it's a combination of how do you use marketing technology, how do you not hire a bunch of people to create content for every slice of that matrix you're trying to build. So I think we're just on the early days of that. We just put in Engagio and other things as well. But I think it's something you have to think long and hard about. Okay, for those of you submitting questions we didn't get to, apologies. Happy to
let's answer them on social media.
Yeah, or happy to do it offline here as well, whatever you like. Thank you, Carolyn, Wayne. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And thank you for the Thai team for inviting us.